Hello there, welcome back to the channel. Well, today we're going to talk about SAML, the Security Assertion Markup language. Well, specifically, we're going to talk about a SAML 2.0. So, if you're someone who's new to SAML, you don't know what SAML is, how it works, this is for you. This video is going to help you understand what SAML is, how it works, what are the different components, and how they communicate with each other. Now, if you're someone who wants to know how to configure SAML in the Cisco ESA and how it works in the Cisco ESA, what are the different things you need to keep in mind while you're configuring SAML in the Cisco ESA, well, this video is for you as well because that's what I'm going to cover at the end of the video after the basics. And yeah, let's jump right into it. Okay, so why would you even want SAML in the first place? Well, SAML, well, basically it enables you to access multiple web applications using one set of login credentials, right? So just one set of login credentials and you're good. The users can sign in once and that's it. They'll have access to all the SAML 2.0 SSO enabled services. What does that mean? That means an amazing, awesome experience for your users when they're trying to log into different services. Well, in your organizations, in any organization today, you don't have just one or two services, right? Or just one or two applications. There's tons of applications that the users will have to access. And the SAML SSO is gonna make their experience wonderful, amazing. SSO stands for nothing but single sign-on. And with SSO, you don't necessarily only have to go for SAML, right? You have other authenticating protocols available as well. For example, instead of SAML, you can use OAuth. Okay, that's one option. And then you also have, for example, OpenID. That's another option available for SAML as well. Okay, so it's not necessary that you always use SAML. Um, you can use the other authenticating protocols as well as long as they're supported, right? SAML is an authenticating protocol for web applications. As I mentioned, just make sure that you understand these points and remember these points. These are literally important points. That's why I've mentioned it like that. Anyways, the key to SAML is browser redirects. Well, yes, once I show you the workflow, the authenticating workflow, you'll understand that how redirects are used. It's extremely important to know that, without redirects, SAML cannot do anything. Anyways, SAML is the most frequently the underlying protocol that makes web-based SSO possible, right? Most frequently this is used. SAML is most frequently used with SSO, right? As I mentioned, other authenticating protocols, for example, OAuth and OpenID, can also be used, but they're not. You'll not see them most frequently used with SSO, right? Now, frankly, if you want to understand SAML, these are the three things that you need to understand. And if you understand these three things, you'll understand SAML inside out, just these three things. And these are very simple to understand, right? Once you understand these three things, SAML is going to look like a piece of cake to you. Okay, so don't worry, I'm going to discuss it now. And yeah, once we move to the next slide and talk about the authentication workflow, let's go ahead. Okay, let's discuss all these steps one by one. This is the authenticating workflow, one of the workflows that you might come across. And this is the one we're going to discuss in this particular slide. So the user sits here at the web browser. On the web browser, the user is going to mention the IP address or the host name of the service provider, right? The user goes into the browser and types in the host name or the IP address of the service provider. That's point number one. And then once the user's web browser reaches the service provider, it's going to try to log in. The user is going to try to log in to that particular service, to that particular appliance. An example of the service provider would be, for example, the Cisco ESA. Okay, the admin is trying to access the Cisco ESA. And once the admin puts in the username and password, the service provider, that's step number two, it's going to redirect to the IdP with SAML authentication request. It's sending an authentication request to the IdP, which is nothing but a database that's going to go ahead and authenticate the user and assert that the user is actually who the user claims to be, right? So what happens in point number three is step number three is, as you see, the browser sends SAML authentication request to the IDP. And what are the examples of IDP? These are some of the examples. So you have the Microsoft 80, you have the Azure, or the DO, like the DO Access Gateway can be used as well. So in the third, you can see that the browser sends SAML authentication request to the IDP. Now the request has reached the IDP. What's the IDP going to do? The IDP authenticates the user. Okay. Once the authentication is done in step number five, you'll find that the IDP redirects to the service provider with the SAML assertion. Remember the last slide, as I mentioned, these are the three things that are extremely important to understand. And if you understand these three things, then SAML is done for you. You'll understand SAML inside out. One is your service provider, second is your IDP, and then you have the SAML assertion as well, which you see here in step number five, right? So with the SAML assertion, the SP is going to understand that, yes, okay, the IDP said that we're good to go with this user. If the SAML assertion is not there, the user will not be authenticated. That's it, as simple as that. Now, in step number six, in step number five, the IDP redirects the SP with the SAML assertion, right? The SAML assertion is there now, and the SAML assertion reaches the browser. The browser relays the SAML assertion to the service provider so that the service provider gets the SAML assertion in order to identify and assert that actually the user was authenticated by the IDP. Okay, in step number seven, the service provider provides access to this requested resource that the user was trying to access. Now, if it failed, if there was no SAML assertion or anything like that, the user will not be given access to the service provider. Okay, now moving forward. Okay, and before we go to the next slide, just to show a quick recap of this particular part, because this is all about SAML. And this is all you need to understand. So we did talk about all these three things. You have the service provider, as an example, the Cisco ESA. You have the IDP, for example, the Azure, and you have the SAML assertion, which is sent by the IDP. These are the three main components of SAML. So the service provider, IDP, and the SAML assertion, as you can see right here. So you have the service provider, the IDP, and the assertion right here. And the magic, obviously, again, you have the redirect right here, the redirections, and then you have, for example, you should have another redirect right here, right? So redirects are extremely important with SAML, and yeah, the main components are SP, IDP, and the SAML assertion. Okay, let's proceed. Okay, let's talk about the authentication workflow. It could be SP initiated or IDP initiated. In the last slide, the example we saw was SP initiated. The user directly tried to access the service provider, and therefore it was initiated by the service provider, right? And the unique thing about SP initiated is a SAML request, which we saw in the last slide as well. Let me just show that to you real quick. In the last slide, we saw the SAML authentication request being sent from the SP, the service provider, to the IDP, right? Okay, now, why do we have SP initiated? The reason is that some service providers, they support SP initiated logins, while others don't. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So when we talk about the IDP initiated, the user in this case tries to log into the IDP by first navigating to the IDP. In your organization, you might have seen a dashboard, like where you have a lot of applications on that portal. You try to log into that portal first, and then you have all the services there, and then you click on that service, and so on. And that's what I've mentioned here as well. An IDP initiated login starts with the user first navigating to the IDP. That IDP is going to be like that your login page when you have that dashboard, you have all the other services mentioned on that dashboard, and so on. And then going to the SP with the SAML assertion. In that case, you'll find that a couple of steps are lessened because you're directly getting authenticated and basically getting authenticated from the IDP, and that it's not initiated by the SP. So those couple of steps are going to be missing in this case. Okay, so okay, let's move on and let's talk about how SAML. What are the different things we can talk about SAML 2.0 inside the Cisco ESA? What are the prerequisites, or maybe what the Cisco ESA supports and whatnot? Let's move on to the other slide. Okay, let's talk about these points. You can use SSO only on the GUI, okay, not on the CLI. However, you can configure SAML in the Cisco Secure Email Gateway using the GUI or the CLI as well. So it's configurable from both the places, the GUI as well as the CLI. But this is for configuration, right? You can configure only one instance of the service provider and the IDP on the email gateway. And if the user logs out of the email gateway, the user is not logged out of other SAML 2.0 SSO enabled applications. So let's say you log out of the ESA, that's not going to log you out of other applications that are SAML 2.0 SSO enabled. Okay, so you cannot configure SAML profiles at the cluster level. That's restricted to the machine level, those configurations. Okay, and you can use any SAML, a standard SAML 2.0 identity provider to configure SSO using SAML on your email gateway. So it's not really just restricted to these that I had mentioned right here, as you can see um, the Microsoft 80 Azure are due. So by the way, if I didn't mention it before, this particular diagram is available in the user guide. You can access it from there. And yeah, as I mentioned, these are not all of the only three options that are available, but any standard SAML 2.0 identity provider should do. But those three are mentioned by name in the user guide for the Cisco Secure Email Gateway. So what I'm going to do now is I guess we're good with the theory, the theoretical part. I'm going to talk about the configuration now. So I'm going to move to the GUI of my ESA, and yeah, let's proceed from there. And before that, let's just quickly touch on these 2 points. These are also extremely important. With the SAML assertion, it does not just assert that the user is who the user claims to be, but it may also have other attributes as well. And also on the IDP, it may ask the user to complete a 2FA, or it may redirect the user to any other authenticating source as well, and the user will have to go through the authentication there as well. So yeah, there are a ton of other things that may happen while the authentication takes place. So yeah, just wanted to let you know that. Let's go to the config now. So what you need to do is in the GUI of your Cisco email security appliance, you can go to System Administration, and from there click on SAML, as you can see right here. Once you click on SAML, this is the page you're going to land on. And in order to configure the service provider, this is the button you need to click on. And then in order to configure the IDP, this is the button you need to click on. Now, first we'll configure the service provider, then I'm going to show you how to configure the IDP on the Cisco ESA, and then we're going to wrap it up, possibly show you how to configure it from the CLI as well. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and click on the first one, add service provider, as you can see this button right here. So just clicked on it. And this is the page you're going to land on once you click on it. And let's go through these options one by one. Okay, let's talk about these configuration options inside the service provider. So the profile name is going to be the name of the profile. You can keep it whatever you want, completely your choice. It's arbitrary. Then you have the configuration settings section, which is the second section, in which the first question is the entity ID. The entity ID, again, is something you can configure. You can give it whatever name you want, but the preferred typical choice is the URI of your SP. As you can see, once I click on this question mark, just to highlight it to those who don't know, if you click on this question mark, this is the kind of menu you're going to get. And this gives you extra information about the option that you're actually trying to configure, right? So the service provider entity ID is used to uniquely identify a service provider. The format of the service provider entity is typically a URI, and that's why I configured it like that, although not required. Okay, moving forward, then we have the name ID format, right? With the name ID format, you cannot configure it. With the name ID format, what does it help you with? The format the IDP should use to specify the user in the SAML assertion. Okay, well, this dictates the format that will be used for mentioning the username. The value you enter here must match the corresponding settings configured on the IDP. So this is something that you will use in the IDP, and if you do not use it correctly, you're going to end up facing problems and you will see errors if this is not correctly mentioned. So name ID format is also very important. Then you have the assertion consumer URL. Well, this is basically the URL that you use to access the appliance, your service provider. And if I was to just show it to you, if I click on the question mark again, the assertion consumer URL is the URL that the IDP should send the SAML assertion after successful authentication. So basically, the assertion consumer URL is going to be used by the IDP to send the SAML assertion to the service provider. The URL that you use to access the web interface of your appliance must be the same as the assertion consumer URL. You will need this value while you configure the service provider settings on the IDP. This is also extremely important, and this is something you'll have to configure in the IDP as well. Okay, so if we're not talking about an IP address or anything like that, so this would be the DNS or the proxy URL, basically that you use to connect to your gateway externally, right? Then we have the section of SP certificate. This is there are three different options for this. The first one is select the certificate from the certificate list. Well, the certificates that are already in your ESA are the ones that you'll see in this drop down. You can also upload a certificate and the key for it, and you can also upload a PKCS at 12. Now, I'll possibly talk more about these certificates and these options more when I discuss certificates. That's something I've kept for a separate video. But yeah, for this, just know that there are three different options for this, and you can select the certificate from your appliance as well, which I can do right now. So if I click on the drop down, it shows me two options: test and the network Viking. I can click on the network Viking in this case, and this is just a self-signed certificate that I've created. Anyways, now moving on. These are optional when you look at signed requests and sign assertions, right? When you talk about assign requests, this is to make sure that you want to sign the requests that are sent from the service provider to the IDP, right? This is optional. It's completely your choice if you want to do it, if you don't want to do it. Okay, now the sign assertions, on the other hand, the second option is to make sure that the assertions that are sent from the IDP are actually signed. And in that case, you will need the certificate that is used by the IDP to sign the assertions on your email gateway. Okay, and then coming to the last part, which is the organization details and technical contact. Okay, for these, for the organization details, you'll enter the details of your organization. The IDP uses this information in the error logs. The IDP uses the technical contact information also in your error logs as well. So let me just quickly put in this information. Let's say TNV, display name TNV. So URL, I'm going to get this one. I'm going to say son at cisco.com, and then I'm going to say submit. I hope I selected everything. That's it. Once the SP configuration is done, this is the page you're going to land on. And if you take a look at this, it says SAML service provider profile has been updated successfully. It gives you all the information, the SP profile name, the entity ID, the assertion consumer URL, and the metadata. This is extremely important. Remember when I was talking about making sure that you make a note of the entity ID, the assertion consumer URL, all of those things. If your IDP supports the import of metadata from your SP, then you can just directly download the metadata and you don't have to, make a note of all those other things. You will download the metadata and then upload it in your IDP and that'll do the trick. That's pretty much it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and commit the changes for now. I click on commit changes, put in a comment, SP configured, and commit changes. Now we're going to move to the configuration of the IDP. So I'm going to click on this button right here, add identity provider. So I click on it. Okay, this is the page I land on. Let's discuss these options one by one. Okay, so coming to these, let me just zoom in a little bit. So the profile name is going to be the name of the profile. Arbitrate's completely a choice, not a problem. You see the configuration settings now. When you talk about the entity ID, this is something you can get from your IDP. I'm going to show you a small example on it, just to show you that we get these values from the IDP. I'm going to show it to you from the Duo, the admin panel. You have the SSO URL. This is also something you can get from the IDP, so that can be configured here as well. Now, I was talking about the certificate right before. So you can get the certificate and you can basically click on choose file and then go ahead and upload the certificate using this particular option. Now, again, the same option that we had with the service that we have with the service provider, where we can download the metadata and then we can upload it to the IDP in the same way we can download the metadata from the IDP and upload it to our SP. And this is something I would recommend over configuring those values yourself. So import the IDP metadata. The metadata file needs to be selected here and then go ahead and submit the button. Click on the submit button. I'm going to show you how it looks from the DON now, just to quickly show that part. Just give me a second. I got some issues with my Duo account, and therefore I, shifted to Azure Active Directory, and I configured it there. I did not face any problems there. My account was active, and everything was working fine with Duo. There were some issues with my account, so I just shifted quickly to Azure. Entity ID, you can get this from your Azure. And the SSO URL as well. You can get this from Azure as well as the certificate. The certificate as well, you can get it from Azure. Once all these three options have been mentioned here, you can just go ahead and click on submit. And this is these are the steps I went for. There's actually a guide as well that provides steps and information about how to configure the Azure side of the configuration, there's another part of the configuration as well that talks about the Google supplied IDP as well. So I'm going to possibly put that in the description or in my comment. In the first comment, I'm going to pin it. So yeah, let me show you if it's working fine, how it should look. Okay, so this is how it should look once the configuration is complete. You can download the metadata, as you can see from here. I chose the metadata from here. I downloaded the file from here and I uploaded to the Azure, and that's how I got it done. And yep, you can view the metadata of the IDP once you're done with the configuration of this end as well. So yeah, this is how it should look. And if I was to show you how am I able to sign in, so let me just show you that real quick. For logging in, just one more step before we proceed. You will need to go to System Administration and then Users, and from there you need to enable external authentication and click on Enable here. So it won't be selected initially, but once you've configured it, you should be able to see this option. I just clicked on it, and yep. So enable external authentication. Just make sure that you have this option selected and choose a SAML. There are other options as well, for example, radius. Um, and then the option that's extremely important is the object ID that you will need to go ahead and mention here. The object ID itself is available in the Azure Active Directory. Once you add the user to the application that you want to run, well, basically it will give you the object ID right there for your user. That's the object ID. You make a note of that. And basically what this means is that whenever this object tries to access the appliance, give it the role of the administrator. This configuration is important. Without this configuration, you will not see the SSO option, the SAML option, um, when you're trying to log in. Okay, so once you're done with the configuration, click on the submit button and then go ahead and commit the changes. And yeah, now finally we're going to jump into the test. Now that's it. That's it. We're done. Yep. Okay, I'm going to log back into the appliance, and this time I'm going to use this option of use a single sign-on. Well, I've already logged in to my dashboard, the portal, and I've logged in once, basically. So it's not going to ask me to, it's not going to ask me for the credentials or anything right now. So all good. As soon as you click on it, you'll be able to log in. I will not put the username or the password this time. This is the option I'm going to go for, and as soon as I click on it, I should be able to log in directly. So let me just go ahead and click on this option of use single sign-on. As soon as you click on it, you should be able to log into the apply. Oh, did I click on it? Yes. So I just clicked on it, and as soon as you click on it, you will be able to verify that it's actually working fine because one, you're able to log in. Two, you should be able to see your company username right here, right? That's the one I chose when I was initially trying to log in, and I was testing it. So yeah, I hope that was useful. Those of you who are new to the channel, kindly go ahead and subscribe. That helps a lot. Also like and comment. That also helps a lot. So yeah, if you have any suggestions for any new videos that any tutorials that you want me to make a video on, I'll be happy to help, and I'll try my best to do that in case I'm capable enough to do that. Yep. Thank you so much. You guys have a great day ahead. Thanks again. Goodbye.